Good evening and welcome to the Kentwood branch of the Kent District Library for our final presentation in a series called Bridging Political Divides, Exploring the Radical Middle. This is presented by the World Affairs Council of Western Michigan and Kent District Library. I'm Erica Kubik, Director of Programming for the Council, and on behalf of my colleagues Rachel Brooks and Michael Van Denen and the Board of Trustees, I welcome all of you. The Council's mission is to empower the people and organizations of West Michigan to engage thoughtfully with the world. To change the world, we believe you must first know the world. And you can learn more about what we do at worldmichigan.org. Tonight, we say a special thank you to our friends at Kent District Library who annually partner with us to provide this free informational resource to West Michigan community. I welcome J.C. Cooper, Director of Projects and Planning at KDL, and incidentally was just named as one of the 40 under 40 with cranes. She's going to share what's happening at the library.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. This is our third in a series of one of the programs that a lot of people look forward to each year, and we're super excited to continue this partnership next year and beyond. So thank you again to World Affairs Council for partnering with us. I would like to also give a little bit of a plug for our programs outside of this one today. We have a lot of great gardening, climate, and other programs, so go to kdl.org/events and see what else we have out there. We have a lot of really great ones heading into fall, and we'll have some others for winter as well. Now I'd like to take a moment to introduce our two guests this evening. Greig was elected in 2014 to serve as state representative for Farmington Hills and served as the Democratic floor leader from 2017 to 2018 and the Democratic leader from 2019 to 2020. As a lawmaker, she championed legislation on economic development, public education, and reproductive rights. She was a 2015 fellow for the Council of State Government, Midwest's Bowie Institute for Legislative Leadership Development program. She received numerous awards, including the National PTA Lifetime Achievement Award, AAUW Michigan Martha Griffiths Equity Award, and numerous Legislator of the Year recognitions. Post-Lansing, Chris served as senior advisor to the Lawmaker Network, a nonprofit organization supporting state lawmakers across the country. She retired in January 2023, but continues to mentor aspiring candidates and community advocates. She earned her bachelor's degree from the University of Notre Dame, majoring in American Studies and Computer Applications. Tonya Schuitmaker served in Michigan's Senate from 2010 to 2018 and was chosen by colleagues to serve as the Senate's president pro tempore, the second woman to hold the position. She served on the Senate Appropriations Committee as a chairperson of the Appropriations Subcommittee on Higher Education. She was also a member of the Senate's Judiciary and Energy and Technology Committees. She is a practicing attorney at Schuitmaker Moratis Law in Paw, Michigan. She also is the co-director of the Michigan Political Leadership Program at MSU. Previously, she was a member of the Van Buren County Community Corrections Advisory Board, Papa Rotary, and the Papa Optimist Club, Daughters of the American Revolution, and the Van Buren County Farm Bureau. She served as the president of the Van Buren County Bar Association and the Van Buren County Republican Women, and as vice chair for the Leadership Fellow. She is currently a community board member for Sturgis Bank and Trust Company. Schuitmaker earned her Juris Doctorate and graduated cum laude from the Detroit College of Law, Michigan State University. So why don't we give a warm welcome to our guests here. And I just wanted to note that after the presentation this evening, there will be ample time for questions. Please exhibit civility to our guests and hospitality to others by asking respectful and succinct questions. The presentation tonight is called Restoring Faith and Democracy, election integrity and civic resilience. Let's welcome our guests again.
Thank you very much, and it's great to see so many people come out for this. Chris and I did a northern Michigan tour, and our first couple of stops we struggled with attendance, so that's not the truth here in Kentwood. So thank you so much, because there's a lot to care about. We're all Americans here. We all care about our great country. So whether you consider yourself a Republican or a Democrat or an independent, we need to make sure that we do so in a civil way. And so that's what was born, what created Michiganders for Civic Resilience. It's actually was formed and an idea coming out of the Carter Center, as in Jimmy Carter. Yes, I'm a Republican, and I was kind of shocked when they called and said we need a right-leaning lead to run this program with Chris, my wonderful Democrat colleague. And I had the opportunity to sit next to Bill Gates from Arizona, not the Microsoft founder, but he was proud, and he was a good Republican, but was very shocked out of Arizona when he got doxxed, and people were saying very unkind things to him. And so I feel very strongly that we need to stand up. Jimmy Carter did not believe in any violence. In fact, he and President Ford, who was right here, who they also are a wonderful friend of ours, and our partnership with them, had a wonderful friendship at the end of the year. And so how many of you can be friends with somebody of a different party? Raise your hands. Is there anyone that can't? Actually, I should, if you can't. So we all will have differences of opinions. A lot of that has to do sometimes with generation. You think differently. Sometimes you think differently because of your background and experiences. But that shouldn't stop us all from having a constructive dialogue to figure out how to solve our problems. And so in the later years, President Carter and President Ford actually formed a friendship. So imagine that they had a very tough election, said maybe some unkind things, but yet at the end of the day, the end of their life, they really kind of came together on a lot. And so as Americans, whether you call our wonderful country an experiment that the founding fathers found, a constitutional republic or a democracy, we all live under that same rule of law. And so that's really what motivated me. I'd like to also, I should have said thank you to our hosts, the World Affairs Council. Thank you very much, Erica and Michael, and then also the Kent County District Library. We really appreciate it, and here in Kentwood. My background is I was a state senator for actually Kentwood for 4 years. So if I look somewhat familiar, it's because I actually represented Kentwood for 4 years, from 2014 to 2018. So I was a senator for all 8 years. I was Senate President Pro Tem, and then prior to that, I served 6 years in the House. I'm an attorney by background, and now I'm back to being an attorney. Please don't hold that against me. I don't know what's worse, a recovering politician or attorney. But I'm so happy to be here today. Michiganders for Civic Resilience, we have mitigate any political violence. There shouldn't be injustice. When people feel like there's injustice, that's when they want to resort to violence. So let's make sure there's no misinformation. Let's not make sure that our elections are safe and secure. We can have faith in them, that our vote counts, and we lost fair and square. And then we also believe in improving civil discourse. Chris and I don't agree upon everything, but we're very good friends, and we can really have a constructive dialogue of how to get stuff done. We're no longer policymakers, but when we were, let's figure out how to pave the roads. That's not a Republican or a Democrat issue. And so that's really kind of the focus of Michiganders for Civic Resilience. And I've talked way too long about myself. I'm going to turn over to my wonderful friend and colleague, Chris Greig.
Thanks, Tonya. Appreciate it. Well, I really appreciate being asked to talk about the radical middle, and I actually feel like I've trained for this my whole life because I am the middle child of 12 children. And so I was kind of that radical middle, always, got the older ones, the younger ones, and so this really spoke to me as well because, believe me, we are all over the place when it comes to politics in my family. I decided to run for office when I was 50 years old. and just kind of thought, you know what, it's time to step in and do something. I was complaining a lot about public education and funding and all of that, so let's get to Lansing and do something about it. It took a little bit of a turn, though, when I was asked to serve in leadership, and then my last term, when I was the House Democratic leader, was during the 2020 presidential election. And talk about being in the thick of it. So my colleague, the speaker, he and the Senate Majority Leader were called to Washington, D.C. to try to talk to them. In April, before the election, we actually had an armed protest at the Capitol where they were trying to knock down the doors, the door I was behind, and screaming, "Let us in." So, it was tough. It was a really tough year, 2020, and just so much doubt on, a lot of people had a lot of doubt about the election and the way it was, the whole certification process. It really opened my eyes to how little most Americans in general know about how our elections are run. And so when we also said that part of the mission of Michiganders for Civic Resilience is going to be on voter education, I was very interested in that as well. And just a little bit more background, the Carter Center is supporting this effort in 6 states, and you probably won't be surprised by them. It's Florida and Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, and then Michigan and Wisconsin. So we all run as independent, cross-partisan groups. And in Michigan, we felt it was extremely important to also have the support of the Gerald R. Ford Presidential Foundation. So they are co-sponsors of Michiganders for Civic Resilience, and we've done several events with them. In fact, we had our launch at the museum, and then we had a dual launch at the museum, and then that evening we went to Ann Arbor and did it again at the library. So anyway, just really important that we have this mission. So tonight, what we wanted to talk about was just kind of setting the table to make sure that, I have it on the right one? I do. Setting the table, like, I know you've heard this in some of the earlier presentations on the radical middle, but how did we get here? So just briefly kind of talk a little bit about polarization and what we really think is going on out there with folks. There's just been a lot of research done on this, so we want to spend a few minutes talking about that, but most importantly, what can we do about it? How can we get back to level set with civil discourse, civic resilience, and what you can also do to be a part of that movement as well. So from that, we'll go on to talk about polarization.
So, believe it or not, the polls actually show that we're not as polarized as what we think we are, but there's still a perception out there that we're very polarized. And just as an anecdote, when I came into office in 2004, people were saying there's so much apathy out there, nobody's voting. And I think our votings were under 50%. That means half of our Americans weren't voting and taking part of our wonderful election system. So now we're up in the 70s. And so lo and behold, there's a little bit more consternation. People are getting motivated. So, but that's probably a good thing. But nobody likes having, going through a divorce, and, our country's not going through a divorce, but nonetheless, it kind of sometimes feels that way. And why is that? There's structural drivers of polarization. There's changing demographics. U.S. foreign population increased from 4.7% in 1970 to 13.7% in 2018. There's also closed media ecosystems. A lot of people just listen to one channel, whether it's Fox News or whether it's CNN, and they don't really go out of that media ecosystem. And so I would encourage you, sometimes, I remember as an attorney going into court, and I represented a husband and wife, or a wife in a divorce case, and I'm like, wow. When I heard the other party talk, it's kind of the same facts, but just a different vantage point. And so, try and get out of, the one where you get your media from. Try and get it from many different sources. There's also rising income inequality, perception, and resentment. That's on both sides of the aisle, both Republicans and Democrats. There's declining trust in institutions. People aren't trusting their government. They're not trusting the rule of law. And, sometimes, it's important. And I'll tell you what, my clerk in Van Buren County, Susie Rome, she's as honest as the day is long, and she's getting kind of intimidation and that she's doing something wrong. And so especially when it comes to our elections experts, right now you guys have in Kent County Lisa Posthumous Lyons for your whole county. I'm not sure who it is for your city, but it's important to treat our election workers because Lisa partnered with us over in the Northern Michigan tour to help educate people about the checks and balances in our election systems. And then over on the east side of the state, we had Lisa Brown, a Democrat from Oakland County. So we had two of the top most populous counties, Kent County and Oakland County. Their elections experts come out and help educate people about the checks and balances in our election system. And then moving to live in politically homogeneous communities. A lot of people, if they want to fit in, and so you start to see, Democrats are more in your metropolitan areas, Republicans are maybe more out in the rural areas.
Yeah, and we're even seeing states in general, people moving to particular states just to make sure that they're in a red state or a blue state too. It's incredible. So we have these structural drivers going on, and so it's kind of like the environment where this can be really bad. And then you have headlines and incidents happening. And we're not immune to that by any means here in Michigan. So we've got kind of two flavors, the nonviolent and then the violent incidents that are driving the perception of polarization as well. So we've already got some top party officials already saying, if our candidate doesn't win, then there must be something wrong with the election, and kind of already setting up that mindset that we're going to retreat into our corners and fight. And then, on the Democratic side, at the DNC convention, we had one of our state senators that, I know her well. Another Notre Dame grad, yay. But anyway, she was extolling like Project 2025, and and it was all about hyping that up and getting people, that's what a convention does, but it doesn't help. And then those are the headlines that we see. And then, of course, we've got like all these claims across social media as well. So every incident, whether it's happening a lot or not, it gets amplified so much that people really start to feel like we are really in a highly polarized environment, and I don't know what to do about it. And then we have, unfortunately, some violent incidents that are happening as well. Several months ago, we had an elderly man that was attacked. He was putting up a Trump sign. Then we had a postal worker that was attacked because she was delivering some literature on Kamala Harris. So we're seeing these incidents, and of course the news is going to play it over and over again, and so it's going to heighten everyone's feelings about just how polarized we are. And and we are, there's definitely polarization, but we're just not as polarized as we think. And that's where I'll pass it over to Tonya to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, voters are less ideologically polarized than they think, as Chris just said, and that misperception is greatest for the most politically engaged. American politicians are highly ideologically polarized. In other words, they believe in and vote for different sets of policies with little overlap, meaning our primaries, the way that we are set up, it's the most extreme wins rather than that radical middle. Even though Americans are not as ideologically polarized as they believe themselves to be, they are emotionally polarized, known as affective polarization. In other words, they do not like members of the other party.
So it's really interesting when you look at the polling. It's like there's a lot of agreement on basic policy across the state, across the country. So like basic gun safety measures, right? Access to reproductive health. When you look at the polling, there's vast majority of Americans and Michiganders agree on a certain set of policies. But when you add in the politicians, and again, they're elected from a lot of times, safe seats, gerrymandered seats, and so they tend to be on the extreme ends of the party ideology, then they amplify it. And so we're hearing from the extremes on these positions. And that's, again, another reason why it may seem like we're a lot more polarized, but when you really dig down and talk to people, it's not nearly as bad as you think. However, we get into this affective polarization where it doesn't matter. You could sit down with someone and you talk about, let's say, gun safety, tax policy, foreign affairs, whatever, but you find agreement and you're talking about it. But then you find out that they are a member of the opposite party and you automatically don't like them. And you just discounted everything that they said. And that's what we're seeing more and more is like this tribal, approach where it's a zero-sum game too that we're hearing from the politicians. And then that drives where people kind of throw out the logic and the policy. But we just said we agreed on all this stuff. But, well, you've changed your mind because you found out that you belong to a different tribe. I forgot to do the slide on that one. And so, but what we're finding from the research is that affective polarization in and of itself, it's not really causing backsliding of democratic norms or a propensity for violence. It's when all of that is added with other things, with the candidates having an incentive for riling people up. Our two-party system actually is an issue. Like compared to Europe that has to build coalitions, when your guy or your gal doesn't win, they still have a part in the government, right? They're building a coalition in most cases. Here, it's winner take all. It's that zero-sum game. If you win, then I must have lost. And that added with this emotional reaction, this affective polarization, causes more trouble here in the United States than it does what we're seeing in European countries. So we can still have that same kind of landscape, but given the two-party system, and also when it comes to violence, given access to weapons as well, that's why we're seeing the research is showing that we're having more incidents right here in the United States. And it's, I guess we're getting the bummer information out first.
Now I get to come in with the positive. So what can we do? We've described the problem.
Well, let me just a couple other things on the affective polarization. So some of the research that was done to try to say, well, how do we combat this, right? And what they found is, and there's a lot of groups that do work on this too. One of them we'll talk a little bit more about later, but it's called Undivided, and it's about bringing people together and having conversations. And what the research has shown is you can have a conversation, you can sit down, you can get to know the other person and start building a relationship and like them. But unless that's an ongoing process, it can be undone very quickly. So what we're trying to do is find more lasting and ongoing organizations and processes to bring people into so they can continue the conversation. Because it won't work if it's a one-off with people. You absolutely have to step into it, into the public square, and you have to make a concerted effort to keep that going. And as, again, and I also mentioned the two-party system, and what we are seeing is some movement, maybe not necessarily to, go to the European style with coalition building or other governments, not just European, but things like ranked choice voting, independent redistricting committees that make the districts more fair, and thank goodness we have that here now in Michigan, that also can have a longer lasting impact and to mitigate polarization as well.
So now's my time. Sorry, I jumped on you there. Get off the sidelines. So we've described the problem. Now, how do we fix it? So first off, have conversations with those you disagree with. Understand their point of view. Sometimes, if you understand, I'll never forget when I went in for my kids' school conferences, and the teacher was really upset because I had cut, I unfortunately did not serve when we had, the state had tons of money. I only served when we had a huge budget shortfall. So I was cut. Anyway, he was very upset because finally there were increases going out, but higher ed got a 10% increase, whereas K-12 only got a 2% increase or something like that. And he couldn't believe I would do such a thing. And I said, well, did you know that, the K-12 budget is so much bigger? It's like 5 times, 10 times what the higher ed budget is. So of course the percentage is going to be, it's when you say a percent, but from a dollar figure, it's more. He's like, oh, I guess I didn't look at it that way. A lot of times, your misperception of why somebody is and has the reasons why, if you just talk to them, maybe you won't agree with them, but you'll understand. And so have conversations that with those that you disagree with. Chris and I had a lot of time up in the UP together, and we of course love to talk politics and everything, and through our conversations, I at least understood where she was coming from, and I don't want to speak for you, but you probably understood a little bit where I was coming from too.
And I think the important thing is to really come at it from a position of curiosity, right? So it's not like talking at somebody, but it's actually having that conversation where you truly are trying to understand. And you can't understand if you don't ask the questions. And I think that's what's been really, really fun talking to you a lot, is like, well, why do you think that way, Tonya? I don't get it, type of thing. And so it's been really good. And if you think about it, curiosity, respect, throw in a little humor, it goes a long way to build those bridges.
Then also diversify your media diet. Don't just listen to Fox News or CNN or MSNBC. Diversify your media diet. Understand our election systems. That's one of the other talks that we give is with either the two Lisas, either Kent County Lisa or Oakland County Lisa. Is we talked about the checks and balances of our election system. That the poll book numbers have to equal the number of ballots cast, that we don't have machines that are connected to the internet at the polling locations. That's not done. It's not connected until all the results are turned in at the end of the night from the Kent County Clerk's office. There's a lot of who's heard that the machines were hacked at the polling locations. They're not connected to the internet, so that's impossible. So a lot of misinformation is out there, and that's one other thing is, a lot of people have very good intentions but spread misinformation. So be very careful online. We're all living in a brave new world. There was not really online when I first came into office. That's making me sound really old, but be careful when you share something again, because it very well might be you might believe it, but it might be misinformation. And so a lot of misinformation is shared by very unsuspecting and people with very good intentions. There's also some bad intentions out there, but and then also you can take part of our election system, whether it's just as a worker. There's a public accuracy test, so you can go down and test the public accuracy. There's so many times you can go down and watch the polling. You can be a poll watcher, you can be a poll worker, so there's lots of opportunity, and I know they're very short on poll workers, so contact your county clerk or your city clerk. Call out disinformation. I already talked about that. Stand up against political violence. Violence happens when you look at what's going on in the Middle East. The core is that people feel that that there was injustice, right? That's why people, take to violence. And so they feel that there's an injustice happening. And so that's what kind of motivates them to act. And so, no matter what happens, be the eyes and ears. We're all one big community. We don't want to see violence, no matter how wrapped up we are into this next election, whether, Donald Trump wins or Kamala Harris wins. It will not be the world will still go on, and there won't be an injustice because all of us took place and took part of our democracy. And then also the last thing is join a democracy resilience network. So either join our organization. There's also several other organizations that we've had the opportunity to partner with. We've partnered with Keep Our Republic, Braver Angels, and I think I'm now going into Chris's. Nope. Oh, is it that me? Okay. So we have the Carter Center, Gerald R. Ford Presidential Foundation, Over Zero, Democracy Fund, Protect Democracy. We also work with Braver Angels, Keep Our Republic Undivided, Faith Forward, World Council of Churches, Election Reformers Network, Michiganders for Civic Resilience, which is what we are. So right down here, there's a QR code, and Chris will put it up at the very end. We encourage you to go online and sign up for our Democracy Resilience Network.
I think what's really encouraging are just how many organizations are very interested in this work. They might have a slightly different flavor, but there's funders, and then there's actually the organization doing the work. So like the Carter Center and Over Zero, so they will provide resources to all these organizations that are starting at the community level. And that was what we find is just so incredibly important is this is about the community. This is about your community and how you want to stand up for democratic norms and for nonviolence. And so, you know, they all sound like great values, of course, but how do I do it? And how do I actually get into the public square? One of the things that I was able to do through the Carter Center was take a trip to Belfast, and it was a faith group that was in there, and we went there to learn from Ireland and Northern Ireland. What happened in that conflict? And are there lessons to learn from that conflict that we can apply here in the United States? Because they're like, you are heading in the same direction that we are, and it was a 30-year conflict, and we're still trying to get back together. They still have peace walls up there separating the communities. Now, one positive thing is during the conflict, the marriage, interfaith marriage, Protestants and Catholics was at 2%, and now it's up to 20%. So they're making some progress. But one of the big lessons, and our leader was Reverend Gary Mason, and he does peace work in Northern Ireland and Ireland, but also in the Middle East too. He goes to Israel and Gaza quite a bit. And his kind of perspective is about faith leaders stepping into the public square, because they all failed the people of Ireland and Northern Ireland during the conflict. They hid behind the church doors. And, you know, they said, well, that's not really my area. I'm just going to say mass, you know, pass the, you know. No, we all have a responsibility to participate, to be part of the public square, to stand up together. And so what our hopes and our goals are these organizations that are being created gives you that tool and that way to get involved. And that's what's just so incredibly important. I'm going to do this one more. Is that, you know, we can say you should do this, you should do that, but if we don't help you do it, then it makes it so much more difficult, because there's a lot to keep up on to be able to do this. So what we're trying to do for Michiganders for Civic Resilience, and our website is mycivic.org, but there's lots of flyers there for you. We're trying to be a hub for resources too. So you can go to our website and you can see all these different groups doing some subset of this work. So whatever appeals to you, you can look at that and say, that's it. That's how I want to get involved. So maybe it is the faith forward space. Maybe it's working on election integrity. Maybe it's, you know, just having those conversations, like organizations like Braver Angels. We just did, or Tonya just did an event with them last week. So we want to be a hub for resources, but we also want to be, you know, proactive too. So Tonya mentioned that we were up north and we did an election education tour, and it was so fascinating too. I learned so much from the county clerk, the Kent county clerk that came with us, Lisa. And she walked everybody through from like casting the ballot. Well, actually, we even started on voter registration, because there were a lot of questions, because, again, a lot of the misinformation, the stories that have been surfaced, like they're bussing in hundreds and thousands of people across the line just so they can vote. and they're illegal and all of this. And she walked through the verification process of how we know someone is actually eligible to vote. And so just giving that information is so incredibly important. And she totally geeked out on the point where the polls have closed. How do we get to the certification process? All the way from, doing the tabulator and reconciling it with the poll books, electronic poll books. And what happens if there's an error, and what do you do? And did you know there's 3 copies of everything, and how it's distributed as backups for this? And oh yeah, remember, we all have paper ballots too. And so we have that as a backup. And she just walked everyone through it, and the level of confidence just grew and grew. And then Lisa Brown, the Oakland County clerk, did the same thing in an event last week in Oakland County. And our goals and our hopes is to get people that really do doubt to come to these events. Sometimes it's a little tough, but on that Northern Michigan tour, especially like it was Alpena, and then I forgot what the other, it was, yes, Charlevoix. Yeah, we had some folks there that were election doubters, I'll say. And I talked to a few of them afterwards, and they really thanked. They said that was a lot of really good information. So we know that having the vocabulary, having the process, understanding it a little bit better, just really raises people's confidence. And that's definitely a service we want to provide, partnering with our local clerks. And also, I don't know if any of you are members of the League of Women Voters, but they also came to a lot of us and shared their experiences. And they actually try to have a member at every county board when they're certifying things. So some of the other things that, I'm just going to say MCR because it is a mouthful, Michiganders for Civic Resilience, is providing training too. So again, you're really interested in election work or getting more involved, but you're really a little nervous. So we actually provide trainings on de-escalating a situation, and then also just conflict resolution in general too. And then we also have, we've had webinars on polarization and doing a little deeper dive on the data that's out there for that as well. But really, as we head into the election and absentee ballots are already out and voting's going on, our real focus at this point is creating a communications network across the state, so that if you see something in your local community or at the county level, that you can report it, and so we can get the right information out. Like, for example, there was just an incident that happened this last week where some campaign literature went out with the wrong election date on it. What we would do is activate the network to say, please put out reminders that the election is November 5th. Right? And just because you don't want to amplify the false information and say this is what happened, you want to keep just reiterating what the correct information is. So that's what this network is doing. Or if we have an incident at a polling place too, that we can, if someone lets us know, then we can actually contact the appropriate organization. There's a lot of election protection organizations doing work out there. There's just a whole network. But again, it's really at that community level where a lot of things happen, and that's why we want to build this network for rapid response. And what we'll do is we'll keep you informed. We just do weekly emails of what's going on, but if an incident happens, then we can activate the network for rapid response. And that's, and that's going to go on, or let's just say there's an incident with some violence. When we say stand up against political violence, we don't mean like go in there and stop it, but to make it known that you do not accept this, you do not support this, it is wrong. I mean, it seems like a no-brainer, right? Well, of course that's wrong, but we don't always say it publicly. We don't always share that information. And so that's what we're trying to build and give those tools so that people have the confidence to stand up and say, no, that's not right. And there's a lot of us. This radical middle is huge. And if we all come together to stand up, then we can go a long way to mitigate any future political violence. And it's going to be a bumpy ride. It's going to be a bumpy ride. And this is going to be all the way through Inauguration Day. Hopefully that'll be the end of it, but you never know. So that's why we really want to focus on this network as well. And of course, we'll continue to coordinate and partner with other organizations because, again, where I said it was so encouraging that there's so many organizations in this space, we have to talk to each other. And we have to make sure that we're leveraging the power of each of these organizations. So that's the other thing we're doing. We're continuing to work. We're plugged into the rapid response on voter access if there are issues. And then we're also plugged into the network that's watching the certification processes as well. And of course, the Secretary of State is aware of what we're doing as well. So just a lot of work that can be done. So building this network is just incredibly important for us. And so that's where you can come in. There's also flyers that you could pick up there or pledge cards that you can take with you to share with anyone you think might also want to join. But on our website, we do have a join page, or you can do the QR. But again, joining the network means that you're helping us with these communications. You're staying informed through our newsletters. It's not about, necessarily being present anywhere in person, but it's, again, building that network that will stand up and say no to violence and will push back on mis and disinformation. It's incredibly important in everything that we can do. If you're interested in being part of that rapid response network too, we have another QR code for you. This is also available on our website too. But this Friday, so in just a couple days, we have a 2-hour webinar all on communications and rapid response. So even if you're just interested in knowing what's going on and how this will all kind of unfold, we'd love to have you on that call too. It's going to be run by experts from the Carter Center and from some other organizations that work on communications. So we hope that you can join us for that as well. And there's, like I said, more information on it on our website too. But with that, I think we're ready to open it up for some questions.
And thank you all again for
Yes.
coming, and thank you to the World Affairs Council.
Thank you so much, Tonya and Chris. And we've already got some questions. If you're watching the live stream, you're free to put them in the chat box or text 616-308-6560, and I'll ask the question for you. But I will hand it over to our audience member for the first question.
Thank you again for the great presentation. I love this topic, and you guys are just great role models, really, for civility. I'm a professor at a local college here named Kuiper College, and we actually hosted an event just a few weeks ago about political civility for our students. So you guys did even better than we did. I mean, you guys are awesome. So great job for that. My question kind of is related to, I loved hearing that you were starting to talk about ranked choice voting and even learning from other countries. The Ireland example is fantastic. I'm a big believer in diversity. I've got children from Haiti and African American and white children in my own family. Diversity is, I think, just a huge part of what makes America great. I mean, the NFL is great because there's so many teams, but we have so many different foods and cultures and races in this country. But we only have kind of 2 political parties, and so sometimes we fight a lot because there's so much just held in those 2 parties. When sometimes there's a lot of other options out there. Even if I date myself, when we were growing up, right, there was a range of people in each party too, and there's not as much of that as you guys talked about. So why am I saying all that? I'm wondering, what can we do more about ranked choice voting or providing more smaller party voting options in this election and in the future?
You mentioned the ranked choice.
Sure. Well, there have actually been some local communities in the state that have passed the option for ranked choice voting. And all they can do is kind of have it there for when the state legislature passes policy to make it available. So I would actually suggest that you keep on your state representative and your state senator and go to their coffees, go to their town halls. Because I always felt that was the most effective way to talk to your state representative, or in my case, because not only were you voicing your concern or question or comments directly to the rep, but it was in front of fellow community members, and so that piques their interest as well too. And I just think and every rep or senator is different in terms of how they do those events, but I say go to as many of those as possible and bring up the issue and saying we want to have more choices. We've, and other states have had success with it, and we can look to other states. We don't have to be the first. We won't be the first, but if you can at least give local communities the option to do that, we can use that as a little testing ground to see how it goes, but we just, even with the independent redistricting committee, we still have a lot of districts that are very blue or very red, and so more choices, the better, I
Thank
think,
you.
personally.
Okay. For what it seems to me is like with the political politicians in office now, we're getting more and more extremists in office instead of middle of the road, and from what I've heard, a lot of it is because the extremists are very organized and able to push out a lot of the moderate candidates at the primary level, and it's really difficult to get reliable information where candidates stand at the primary level. You just get a ballot, DR, and you don't know which ones are, at least I haven't been able to find any reliable information. Is there any resources for that you know of?
Well, Chris mentioned, I think the League of Women Voters always did a very, I think, comprehensive voter guide. They'd ask questions and everything. That would be my first thought. Chris, do you?
Yeah, I think the League of Women Voters, I know in my community, they sponsor the local debates too, and a lot of times it's the general election. But to get to your point about the primary is, honestly, I think talking to your local Republican club or local Democratic club and say, we need a debate at the primary level. And actually getting them, like I had one the first time I ran, and I remember people were like freaked out because we made it a public event that anyone could come to. And they're like, they're going to get you on record for saying something. And I was like, oh, give me a break. I'm just going to talk, that's take it or leave it. This is what I am, type of thing. But that was a big deal, and they didn't always do that. And I think we need to put pressure. I mean, it's a little hard because most people, I think, don't identify with the Republican or Democratic local club, but that's your in to get like these primary events where you can get in front of candidates and ask them these questions. We've got to do something where we get people to actually answer questions. It's just so, like watching a debate, you got your agenda and you just pivot and you talk about what you wanted to talk about. But I think the more pressure we put on our local community to start making that the norm, then we'll have a little bit more success. But in the meantime, the League of Women Voters is also a good option to go to see if they would sponsor a debate at a primary level and or general level, and get involved that way. Again, back in Farmington Hills, we do League of Women Voters partners with the Council of Homeowners Association, of all things. We have a lot of subs in Farmington Hills. And so they find these different ways to partner for debate. So I try to work through local organizations that have influence over candidates.
Okay,
That's kind of a long answer to that question. Sorry.
Hi, one of the most difficult conversations I have is about disinformation. It seems like the minute you address, is that true or is it false, people's hackles just go up and there's all kinds of defenses. Do you have any suggestions for how to begin and participate in that kind of discussion about, I even like the term disinformation as opposed to fake news.
So you're asking how to have a conversation when you know somebody's wrong?
Without raising people's defenses?
Yeah, I think what Chris said is curiosity. Don't take it from a defensive. Nobody likes to be on or put on the defensive, but just help me understand. Like why are you saying that? And so sometimes that is a way to start to disarm somebody, because if you start off with you're wrong, here's why you're wrong. That's not going to be a productive conversation. So start, with help me understand, that's a lot less disarming than you're wrong, and telling them every which way from Sunday why they're wrong. So just help me understand something, and then just say, I see it a little bit differently. Here's why. And, then maybe there's commonality that you guys can agree upon. And when you find that commonality, that means you're having probably a productive conversation.
I just had one of these conversations with one of my brothers. And it started out, we were talking about, well, I kind of stepped into it, to be perfectly honest. It's kind of a funny story. So he married a woman from Brazil, and she just became a citizen. And she's a social worker, very progressive. And I said, oh, boy, Melanie must be really excited to vote for Kamala Harris. And my brother just goes, not so fast. And so then he launched into a bunch of stuff about, the economic situation and how, former President Trump was going to deal with it. And I just stopped and I just said, where are you getting your information from? I said, I'm worried too about my retirement and this. So first, like Tonya was saying, trying to find that common ground. Yes, I'm worried about my retirement funds too. Where did you get this information from? So I was really asking him, trying to get at it, and I didn't change his mind, but I think he appreciated that I respected him and asked him open-ended questions. I didn't judge until I told him that tariffs are going to be bad, but things like that. And it was trying to have that respectful conversation coming from, as Tonya was saying, from curiosity too. So, but good luck. Sometimes it's hard, and you just got to walk away sometimes too.
Thank you.
Thank you. In all honesty, I think you may have just answered my question, but I'll just ask it anyway because, the answer might be a little more detailed. But I'm having a hard time getting school board candidates to answer my questions on really anything, in person, online. Do you have any advice? It's supposed to be a nonpartisan section, so to me, asking them questions, which they've been pretty softball questions, I don't understand why they're so afraid to just tell me one way or another. It's a lot of yeah, I agree with you, and not actual answers.
Well, my first question was, are they really just volatile questions? But you said that they're softball questions.
They're pretty easy questions. It's just more so hey, are you gonna help the district improve its bullying policy and things like that? Not really
wow.
Crazy questions.
That's really disheartening to hear.
It is.
Because these are the people that will be guiding the next generation. I don't really have...
I think what I'm seeing too is some people are recruited to run for these positions that really don't have any experience in that too. And so they're not confident asking it. And so they're afraid that, they say one wrong thing and it's going to be amplified, and that's no excuse. If they're running, they should answer these questions. So it's kind of a similar answer to before, where find an organization that might have some leverage. Again, when it comes to school board, one of the things I did, I was the PTA council president back in the Farmington Schools District, but the PTA council did the school board debates. And bringing that parent group and having them actually ask the candidates to attend and letting people know. And then the TV10, the local public access channel, actually filmed it and showed it too. So then it was also on record, and they took questions from the audience as well. So again, I think sometimes you have to find those organizations that might hold a little sway, a little leverage, and try to go that route. It's not what we want, but maybe that's a way to get that in.
Okay, I'll give that a shot. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. School theme, can we continue that
Yes.
theme? Okay. My name is Ellen Zmors, and I'm the executive director at the Michigan Center for Civic Education. And one of the other drivers that we notice is the lack of funding for civic education in our state. And we know with recent surveys, social studies, let alone civics, isn't being taught in elementary schools, and it's very few personalities of teachers who are doing really engaging civic work in secondary schools. So we do things like mock trial, We the People, election and voting education with the Secretary of State. And so I'm curious as to if you could speak to the school element and what you might say to those teachers who are fearful for their jobs and therefore don't entertain any of that content and don't have the professional learning because we don't fund it in our state.
Well, government was always my favorite class and social studies. And what I appreciated about Mr. Hall, who kind of inspired me to have a passion for social studies, understand history, because history kind of repeats itself. And and he unfortunately just passed away about 6 months ago. I went to his funeral because one of the probably the proudest moments of it was to help repay Mr. Hall. I had him up to the Capitol when I was a state senator, and he was tickled pink. Anyway, I asked him while he was on the floor with me, I'm like, I never knew whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. And he's like, well, I'm a hardcore Democrat, but he's like, I liked it that way because I wanted people to learn how to learn, not to be told what to learn. And so, it's so critical, and, it's such a hot potato button in schools these days. I'll give them a lot of leeway because teachers are probably underappreciated and overworked. But, it's so important that to support our teachers, number one, but also to make sure that we light the fire for the Tonyas of this generation. Going about that, I don't know if I have the answer to do it. I'm not in office right now, but certainly, I think civics and government are very important. And I guess I would take my plight to the state school board. We have a state school board. They're responsible for setting policy. In fact, Michael Rice, who used to be the Kalamazoo superintendent, is the state superintendent. And I always found him very accessible. If you want to get a note to him, if you need help, let me know. I think I still have his cell phone number somewhere. Happy to help you because I think social studies and government and civics are so very important.
Yeah, and when I was in office, we did pass a bill through the legislature to require financial literacy as an option. So there is a route to go through the legislature too. So I would also give the same advice about going to your state rep and your state senator and saying, we need some policy change and we need appropriations. So again, you can go on the government, on the House website or the Senate website, and you can see who's on the appropriations committee for education too, and start with that. But you can also talk to the Michigan Association of School Boards, of principals, secondary principals. It's not fun and it's not easy. But I will share that next Thursday, I'm spending a whole day with the 7th grade classes where my kids went to middle school because they want to talk to me about civics and how laws are passed. So there are teachers out there, obviously, doing the work. My sister is actually a social studies teacher back in Indiana where I grew up. And but we need more pressure on the legislature to do it. There was some movement in the past, like when former Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor really was pushing for this. We saw some momentum, and I don't know why it's dropped off a little bit now, but I think there's some avenues to follow to bring it back up.
They have a coalition, too, that we're a part of in Michigan, so similar in the education world. So enjoy.
Start lobbying Lansing, I say.
There was $5 million in the Senate budget and 2.2 in the House, and 0 got passed this year. I'm sure in the future we'll get there, but.
Well, thank you for what you do.
Thanks for the presentation. A quick question, how polarized over the last 10 years has the Michigan legislature become? Or said differently, how easy is it for a Democrat to vote with the Republicans or vice versa?
Well, I I can only speak to when I was in office. Now, I termed out in 2018. I would say about 90% of what we passed was done on a very bipartisan basis. There was, the 10% of hot button issues is where it kind of, the differences of the two philosophical parties came through. I think, Chris, you have a similar, because I think we discussed this before, a similar thing. I'm not so sure it's not even a lot more polarized now, but I'm not there, so I also, until I know the facts, I don't want to say anything.
Yeah, I think it's tough right now because of in the House especially, it's an election year, and there's only a one-seat majority. And so they actually went through a period of time where the two Democrats that won their mayoral elections left office, and so it was actually tied. And there was a concerted effort not to vote with the Democrats on anything because they couldn't pass anything. So they even had some bills that were sponsored by Republicans, and they voted against it. Because, and so it's, the best year is in that first year when it's not the election year, and you do that 90% that you're working together. My first bill that I passed was on a bipartisan group led by Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley, and it was one of the best experiences I had. And there are a lot of those opportunities, but I think it is getting kind of tough. And a lot of it is just amplifying, we've got some pretty strong personalities that just want to stir it up on both sides. And I think it is tough, and we need to get better, and we need to hold our electeds accountable for their rhetoric and for their, when they don't move things forward. But the day-to-day stuff does get done, and it gets done on a bipartisan basis for the most part.
We are over time, but we're going to have one last question.
Bring us home.
My question builds on that last one. I heard you say earlier that voters are closer together than they think they are, and politicians are further apart than the voters are. And you two are both former politicians. Are there many active politicians engaging in work like this? And how can we as voters encourage more current politicians to take this posture?
That's a great question. I do think there's probably, and I hate to generalize it, but 10% that probably just don't go to Lansing or go to Washington and really just want to be, strident and, it's us versus them. I do think, though, there's more than not 90% that just really are good people and want to get good stuff done.
I've talked to a lot of the current sitting Democrats anyway, and they're very interested in this work. One in particular has come forward and is actually more public about it and talking about it. So I've seen a few, but again, it gets a little tricky. We actually, the Carter Center, working with the Ford Presidential Foundation, created candidate principles, and they were trying to get Republicans and Democrats running for a particular office together to abide by these principles. Well, I found out couldn't quite do it because of the nonprofit status, I guess. But before they stopped really doing that, they had a hard time finding a lot of candidates on both sides that could do that. And we've got to just, again, keep pushing those kind of initiatives and putting public pressure on, we want you to work together, or at least be civil while you're working. And I think, again, it's going to be incumbent upon us as the public to do that. But there are some on both sides. We actually, one of the guys that is in our network is another former, but he's been fantastic working with us on things too. But we need more public pressure to let them know that's what we expect of them.
This is a great time to end the program for tonight. Let's give Tonya and Chris another round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.